if it were about climate change, they wouldn't be destroying the Amazon rainforest for a one-time event. I'm Stephanie Keith.
And I am Tara Manjekovic, and we are unapologetically outspoken. Hey everybody, what is it?
Friday.
It's
Friday.
Friday. Oh my God. You know how when you're traveling and you just kind of lose track of time? Well, apparently it's one of those. I should know it's Friday because it's the looming possible government shutdown. Um, I just arrived in Dublin about 30 minutes ago, came straight to the hotel to get this podcast done before we go exploring. And all I've really been seeing is what's on the BBC News and what I've had a chance to look up briefly this morning and during my flight. So, Stephanie, what is going on?
Yeah, well, you're a trooper because I would not want to look at anything while traveling, but you'll have to let me know how Dublin is because that's kind of one of those places on my bucket list that I just need to go to someday. So, yeah, government shutdown. Okay, it appears that it's not going to shut down because now all of a sudden Chuck Schumer has completely changed his mind and is now supporting the bill. And he's come out publicly, so he likely wouldn't have given public support if he didn't already have the Democrat votes needed for it to pass. So they're expecting for it to pass later today, in the 11th hour, just as always, after a big theater performance from Congress, which I'm just so sick of. And mark my words, by the way, this will pass, and then we will get to the end of the year, and they'll keep pushing it and pushing it and pushing it, and then it'll be Christmas, and they'll pass it so they can go home, and it's going to be another omnibus spending bill. So I'm just going to throw that out there because I'm sick of it.
I'm really just you know how normally you're the one who has the positive point of view. I'm gonna hold out hope this time that they will have their shit together because there's a Republican majority in Congress. And I think with this particular CR, like if they hold it up, it's the Democrats that are holding it up. So they know it's going to be their fault if they don't pass it. And I that's my guess as to why Chuck Schumer suddenly supporting it. Because isn't it usually the Republicans that are holding everything up?
Yeah. Yeah. And this is like literally continuing the Democrat spending. So,
Right.
you know what I mean? It's like I don't even know why they'd be against it because it's literally like what they've wanted in the past, but it's just yeah, it's a big theater performance. Rand Paul is like siding with Massey, like he doesn't want it to pass. Trump is pissed at Massey and like wants to, primary him, get someone else in there. Like it's just a shit show. It is a total shit show. And it'll continue. After this, there will be a bunch of nonsense hearings where nothing happens. And that's what they'll be focused on. And I hope you're right. I really do. I hate like not being positive about it. But at this point, I don't trust any of these people in Congress, both Democrats and Republicans. I really don't trust any of them. So, anyhow, to switch to something that I do think is freaking badass is Caroline Levitt, as you know. And so I have my badass clip of the week of her handling the most arrogant AP reporter, and she does it. She's so masterful in the way she responds. So take a listen to this clip.
Pay the tariff because I have. They don't get charged on foreign companies. They get charged on the importers.
And ultimately, when we have fair and balanced trade, which the American people have not seen in decades, as I said at the beginning, revenues will stay here, wages will go up, and our country will be made wealthy again. And I think it's insulting that you are trying to test my knowledge of economics and the decisions that this president has made. I'm now regret giving a question to the Associated Press.
Sorry.
I now regret giving a question to the Associated Press. So it kind of cut off in the beginning, but this guy, in the most arrogant tone, he's like, have you ever paid a tariff? Because I have. Just so condescending. It's like she handled that very well.
She is brilliant. I absolutely love her. And I saw this article about how, guess who else really loves her? women in China. Because while, the liberal media here tries to cut her down all the time and make her look stupid and talk shit about the age difference between her and her husband, she's totally getting praised in China and being hailed as like this inspiration to women who've been trying to, rise up from the traditional homemaker role. And this was originally in an article in the South China Morning Post, where it was saying Chinese women like her because she represents this traditional concept of a woman who's family oriented, attractive, supportive of their husband, but also has their own career, and then is balancing that with brand new motherhood and like went right back to work. And they're also praising her for her calm and assertive tone. So one social media user said, she's smart, tough, concise, and refreshing. And then another said, look at the eloquence and temperament of this beautiful spokesperson. There is no frustration, but only calmness, being assertive without being rude and pushy. And then it was kind of funny because a lot of the comments were about how pretty and blonde she is. And I will say, from when I went to China, I went with a girlfriend of mine who has blonde hair like yours, Stephanie. She's just this long, beautiful blonde hair. And all of the locals, the Chinese people, wanted to take pictures of her and her beautiful blonde hair. So maybe it's because Levitt is like a beautiful blonde, but they all seem to love her.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, I mean, I'm glad that people are making those comments about her looks because the flip side of that is these hateful people on the left that tear her down. I mean, they're making fun of like the size of her lips and the way she does her makeup, like stuff that's just it's just mean and to think that adults are actually judging someone based on those things is like absolutely childish. And so that was a big thing, where they're like bullying her and the way she does her makeup and all this nonsense. So it's just so ridiculous. But I just love how she responds to every question with so much clarity and she cites facts. And what's even more impressive is she won't be looking at her notes constantly or using these phrases like, let me be clear, and then not saying anything, or let me circle back, like we got with the Biden administration. It's just like a total 180 from KJP. And I know we both needed that because we were about to pull our hair out with those like non-answers all the time. And I mean, I think she totally schooled that reporter on tariffs. And yeah, the AP probably will get kicked out of the press room too. I wouldn't be surprised. But tariffs, like that is the hot button right now. I don't know about where you are in Europe, but it's all I'm hearing about here. The MSM in Canada are like completely whining about Trump's tariffs, which is, again, another example of hypocrisy because Canada has always had huge tariffs on the United States. This isn't anything new. Like they've had a tariff of anywhere from 200 to 390% on different US dairy products. They have a 238% tariff on chicken. Aluminum, steel, and copper all have a 25 to 45% tariff. And Trudeau was asked about this by reporters. Like, well, he was bitching about Trump's tariffs of 25%. And they said, well, don't you have a 200% tariff on US dairy? And he like just shrugs his shoulders, like, yeah, what are you going to do about it? So that happened. And then the next day, China slapped a 100% tariff on Canada. So I think even they are like pissed at that arrogant asshole. But that just like came out of the blue because China wasn't even really a part of the conversation. It was more beef between Canada and the US. And China's just like, well, screw it. I'll slap a tariff on you too. So that happens. Well, now Canada is saying that they're putting a reciprocal 25% tariff on the US, which is going to affect nearly $30 billion worth of goods, is what they're telling us. But they already had tariffs on us all along. So is it really going to make that much of a difference for the United States? And when you look at the big picture, trade with Canada is only 1% of our economy. But trade with the United States is 1/5 of Canada's economy. So just like all these other countries, they need us a lot more than we need them. And under Trudeau, over the last 10 years, Canada has had the highest household debt in the G7. Wages have been flat since 2016. 40% of Canadians are living paycheck to paycheck, and half of Canadians couldn't afford a $200 emergency. So they can try to play this game, but they're not going to win a trade war. I mean, Trudeau himself said that Canada will crumble if the US implements tariffs. That's why Trump said, okay, well, you could just become the 51st state and you could be Governor Trudeau. So I don't know why they're trying to be these big bullies when they know they're not going to win this.
No, and you know what's crazy? Like, I feel like this is such a game. It's literally like who has a bigger dick, right? It's reciprocal tariffs and retaliatory tariffs. And like who's even calling the shots in Canada at this point? Because isn't Trudeau like not even in power anymore? And then like and how does that differ with Ontario, right? Because I remember earlier in the week, the Premier of Ontario, Doug Ford, this even last week, he was ranting and raving about turning off electricity for Americans, saying, they're going to be relentless and they won't back down because, President Trump is doing an unprovoked attack on Canada and their families and their jobs, and it's unacceptable. And then he put a 25% surcharge on electricity to New York, Michigan, and Minnesota on Monday. And then I guess he had a call with the Secretary of Commerce, Howard Lutnick, and suddenly like did a total 180, changed his tune, rescinded the tax, and then went on a local radio show where he completely backtracked from his threats. And he said, quote, I want to apologize to the American people. I spent 20 years of my life in the US, in New Jersey, in Chicago. I love the American people. I absolutely love them. Secretary Lutnick and President Trump are brilliant business people. They're hard negotiators. We need to put this behind us and move forward and build the two strongest countries in the world.
It's just embarrassing. Like, when are these people going to learn? How many people now? It's Zelensky, and the EU, England. They're all, trying to act tough. Macron. And then they turn around and kiss Trump's ass because they realize they need the United States more than we need them. But I remember hearing that, I guess it was last week or maybe earlier this week, where people here, mainly the MSM and, leftists, were just going on about how electricity is going to be shut off and it's all Trump's fault and blah, blah, blah. The same people complaining about electricity being shut off are the same ones that are against drilling in the US and are the same ones that wanted the pipeline with Canada shut down. So it's just, it's another reason why we absolutely need to become energy independent. And I honestly can't help but think that Trump is using this as a strategic move in his game of chess to make America energy independent and to kind of show people like, hey, we wouldn't have to worry about the electricity being shut off if we were drilling here and getting this up and running. So I don't know. I think it's going to get more and more people on board with America producing its own energy and just with Trump's agenda as a whole. I think it's backfiring big time on all the people fighting it right now.
Yeah, I did come across this very funny clip that I want to play of Trump reacting to the whole like retaliatory tariff thing. And this was yesterday. And he once again started talking about how Canada should be a US state. So I have to play this.
In the case of Canada, we're spending $200 billion a year to subsidize Canada. I love Canada. I love the people of Canada. I have many friends in Canada. The great one, Wayne Gretzky, the great. Hey, how good is Wayne Gretzky? He's the great one. But we have, I know many people from Canada that are good friends of mine. But, the United States can't subsidize a country for $200 billion a year. We don't need their cars. We don't need their energy. We don't need their lumber. We don't need anything that they give. We do it because we want to be helpful, but it comes a point when you just can't do that. You have to run your own country. And to be honest with you, Canada only works as a state. We don't need anything they have. As a state, it would be one of the great states anyway. This would be the most incredible country visually. If you look at a map, they drew an artificial line right through it between Canada and the US, just a straight artificial line. Somebody did it a long time ago, many, many decades ago, and makes no sense. It's so perfect as a great and cherished state. Keeping "O Canada," the national anthem. I love it. I think it's great. Keep it. But it'll be for the state, one of our greatest states, maybe our greatest state. But why should we subsidize another country for $200 billion? It costs us $200 billion a year. And again, we don't need their lumber. We don't need their energy. We have more than they do. We don't need anything. We don't need their cars. I'd much rather make the cars here. And there's not a thing that we need. Now, there'll be a little disruption, but it won't be very long. But they need us. We really don't need them. And we have to do this. I'm sorry. We have to do this. Yes.
It cracked me up.
I know. I love how the only Canadian he can think of is Wayne Gretzky.
Wayne Gretzky. I have friends. I have lots of friends in Canada. Wayne Gretzky.
Oh, we'll keep
okay.
"O Canada" as the national anthem. You know,
Yeah,
it's
they can
funny.
keep it.
Yeah, because that was like a whole thing where, the hockey players were all fighting over the national anthem. And that was when I was watching this, press conference with Trudeau, where he's just ranting about these tariffs and saying, like, yeah, we're not going to stand for your national anthem. Like, take that. And I remember thinking, didn't you resign? Like, are you even in power anymore? Like, why is anyone listening to you? Well, it turns out, yeah, he's not. They have a new prime minister, Mark Carney. And Tara, I mean, it's like if you took all of our conspiracy episodes and you put a face to all of them, that would be Mark Carney. Okay. First of all, this guy hasn't even lived in Canada in over 10 years. And not only does he live in Europe and hold citizenship in England, Ireland, and Canada, but in a lot of interviews throughout the years, he's always described himself as a European. But now he's in charge of Canada. And people on TikTok, again, this is TikTok, take it or leave it. But a lot of people are saying it just doesn't add up because this guy was running against three people, but he got 86% of the vote, which means all three other people together only got 14%. So people were raising the question. I don't really know. I'm just repeating what, a lot of people think is very odd. But also it's odd because he kind of pulled a Kamala where he really wasn't telling the public any actual plans or policies that he would implement. And right now, like Trudeau was wildly unpopular. That's why he was resigning. Well, Carney was an economic advisor to Trudeau. So I can't imagine everyone in Canada is like all excited about him, but maybe they are. I don't know. The whole thing's kind of weird. But what I find truly alarming is that he was a member of the group of 30. Okay. This group of 30, I'm kind of thinking are the elites that run the world. Okay. It's an international body of leading financiers and academics. And he was right there at the top of that. Also, he was on the foundation board at the World Economic Forum. Also, he attended the annual meetings of the Bilderberg Group in 2011, 2012, and 2019. I don't think we've done a full episode on the Bilderberg Group yet, but I'm going to put it on the list now because that truly, it's like goes back decades to who is running the world. Okay, so this guy is involved with all of these evil elites, at least in my opinion. And, these are the people like the World Economic Forum that have publicly talked about doing things like depopulation and throwing people in 15-minute cities. And he's at the tippy top of this pyramid. So I don't know. I just thought that was like really alarming, really shady. And I want to get your thoughts on it.
Yeah, after you mentioned this, I went and I did some like little quick research on this, and I guess he's a former central banker, and he led the Bank of Canada and also the Bank of England. And this guy's like all about the climate justice program, and he's against fossil fuels. He's repeatedly talked, like for the last 10, 15 years, about how all of the remaining fossil fuels in Canada need to be left underground, unburned, which I don't know how that's going to work because fossil fuels are a huge part of Canada's economy. But this guy recently served as the UN Special Envoy for Climate Action and Finance, and he has a bunch of really crazy climate ideas that are basically going to tank Canada's economy even further. But his reign as prime minister may not even last long because he's replacing Trudeau in the party to head up Canada's Liberal Party, which is the party that's currently in power. But Canada's parliament resumes on March 24th. And apparently, when this happens, the opposition parties can call for a vote of no confidence. And if that passes, then Canadians will go back to the polls in early May. So I think if this guy does stay in power, he's going to clash a lot with Trump. So I don't know. We'll see. Um, but I wanted to, this is something like still on the tariff topic because do you remember how I said last week that I was going to start listening to Gavin Newsom's podcast?
Mhm. Yep. How's
Mhm.
that
Yeah.
going?
Okay. So yeah, I downloaded some episodes and listened on the plane this morning. And the one I was most interested in is he just did an episode yesterday with Steve Bannon. And I swear in this past week, he's done 3 podcasts. Like, I don't, when does he have time to run California if he's like
Oh, he's never run
doing
California.
podcasts?
He's got all the time in the world.
Yeah, apparently. So they were talking about the whole tariffs thing.
Mhm.
And I thought what Steve Bannon said was interesting. And so I want to play a quick clip of that.
President Trump, I do think they're coming in because I think he's changing the geostrategic model of the United States back to a hemispheric defense, away from the post-war international rules-based order, which has really gutted the United States. It was great for a while, right? It was great for 80 years of relative peace and prosperity, and America dominated. There's a lot of attributes, but it gutted the middle class. Remember, and the working class. And at the end of the day, we had allies that were taking advantage of it. Give me a second on this. If you take the rim of the Eurasian landmass, you got Western Europe, the Persian Gulf, the Gulf Emirates, Middle East, then you've got the Straits of Malacca, the South China Sea, and then up to Korea and Japan. Those 4 nodes, we have commercial relationships, trade deals, capital markets integration, right, some cultural interface, but it's it's an American security guarantee. This is how, whether it's NATO or the Middle East or South China Sea or up with Japan and Korea, we have combat troops there. We have 150,000 troops deployed today in, I think, 115 countries. This is one of the reasons people talk about foreign aid with USAID, which I'm against a lot of this stuff going on, but it pales in comparison to what we're underwriting for countries that were upside down on every trade deal. Our trade deficit I think in January alone was a record trade deficit. I think it was $100 billion. Yep. So not just do we have budget deficits, we have trade deficits that are kind of inextricably linked because we've gutted all the manufacturing jobs. We've offshored those. And I think Trump's geoeconomic strategy is a massive reshoring process. And I think you're seeing this now. And I might note, and I don't want to take a cheap shot, a lot of those traditionally would go back to California, but they're going to Arizona and Texas because I think they're looking at red states now as having lower regulation, lower taxes, and people are going there. And I think this is going to change the demographic change in the United States as you have Trump's reshoring come back to the United States. Well, and so, to be fair, I think that's tied to unwinding the post-war international rules-based order. We're going to tell people that, hey, we're not going to be everywhere. Kids from California are not going to be on carrier battle groups. Guys deployed from San Diego and kids that live in the Inland Empire are not going to be deployed in the Red Sea with 2 carrier battle groups that keep the Suez Canal open so that Europe can get energy resources from the Persian Gulf. I think those days are kind of over. We'll pick and choose as we pull back and look at hemispheric defense, not retreat from the world, not be isolationists, but kind of take care of the homeland first, and particularly take care of the people in the homeland, the working class and middle class.
Okay, so he was relating all of that to this whole tariff program because obviously Gavin was like pushing back on it. And I thought that was very interesting because it really is like reinstituting the world order with everything that Trump's trying to do, which makes sense as to why, all of Europe is so up in arms about this because everything I saw on the news and when we were in Scotland, it was the BBC. And it was all about the tariffs, just
Hmm.
the tariffs and how they're going to impact, all the countries in Europe and the UK.
Well, yeah, because nothing is strong anymore. I mean, look at what the left has done to Europe. They don't have a strong military. Their economy is, collapsing in some instances. All the climate change and the open borders, all these left policies has really put them in a bad situation. And I want to keep talking about this, but I have to just say, I cannot believe I'm going to say this. Gavin Newsom is actually being pretty fucking smart. And you want to know why? He is probably the only Democrat that actually sees the writing on the wall and knows the Democrat Party's done. And if he has any chance of continuing his political career, he better make a drastic change. And so, what is he doing? Who has he had on the podcast so far? Steve Bannon and Charlie Kirk, about as right winged
And
as you can be.
yes, and Michael Savage. And I haven't listened to the episode of Michael Savage yet, but he's a conservative commentator.
Hmm.
So far he's interviewed three conservatives.
Yeah. Well, because he knows no one's going to want to listen to him banter with a leftist because we hear that every day on the MSM and on other podcasts, and people aren't tuning in. They're losing ratings like crazy. So he knows if he wants high ratings, he wants his podcast to be at the top of the charts, he needs to bring in people on the right. And he can use his charm to schmooze the younger generations that don't know his whole history. And it's pretty fucking smart if you think about it. And he's like the only one in the Democrat Party that is thinking ahead and saying, hey, we need to change something.
Yeah, and he's doing it in such a non-confrontational way. Like when
Mhm.
I played that clip last week with Charlie Kirk, he's like, I agree with you. I agree with you. I
Mhm.
agree with you. Yeah, I agree with what you're saying. Like I mean, it's going to get in the heads of the people that are listening that he's not a bad guy, that he
Yeah.
has moderate views, that he's
Hmm.
going, going to be a great candidate.
Yep.
And this is so well coordinated and planned on his part. And that's why, like I said, I'm going to be listening.
He probably has a great PR team. And even for someone like me that knows how evil this guy is and all the damage he's done, I listen to his voice and it is like everything about him just like lures you in. He's like a freaking vampire, like he just and that's the thing. The guy has no, he stands for nothing, which is why he can so easily agree with something that's completely opposite of everything that he's supposedly stood for all these years because he has no true values or morals. It's like psychopathic behavior, but it's really smart from a PR standpoint. So back to the whole tariff thing, the EU is, that Ursula that like was talking
Ursula
about,
von Leyden?
yes.
Yes.
And I can't help but think of Ursula on The Little Mermaid because she's just as fucking evil. But she's saying that now the EU is going to implement tariffs against, the United States set to start April 1st. And I think what the media is trying to do is make everyone in America like panic about tariffs and oh my gosh, the cost of goods is going to go through the roof. But we have to remember that tariffs apply to goods that are manufactured in other countries and shipped here. They don't affect products that are made inside the United States. And so when you look at not just what's right in front of us, but you look at the future that Trump is trying to build to make America great again, right? This is going to be a big motivating factor to get companies to bring manufacturing back into the United States and get America back to what it used to be. And this tells me that Trump is betting big on this. Like he's putting his money where his mouth is. He's not just talking about, reviving made in the USA brands, but he's actually putting pieces in place now that are going to incentivize companies to come back to America along with all the deregulation. And that's the other thing. Lee Zeldin, the head of the EPA, he just announced so many cuts to all of these regulations, which is huge because that's a big reason why companies didn't want to mess with making anything in the United States. So you have a lot of companies already. This week, it's GE Aerospace that just announced a $1 billion investment in the United States. There's a brand called Asahi, which is a Japanese beer company. They're moving its manufacturing to Wisconsin. And I think we're going to see this more and more. And so, of course, like I said earlier, the MSM is once again saying the sky is falling and the economy is crashing because of big bad Trump and his mean tariffs. So, with all of that being said, I have another clip to play of Caroline Levitt, and she's answering questions about a possible recession. So, listen to how she handles this one.
Anniversary today of the dot-com bubble crash. There's a lot of concern for a lot of Americans right now about the state of the economy. President Trump has refused to rule out a recession. Secretary Lutnick, however, has told us there will not be one. So can the White House just tell and assure Americans today that there's not going to be a recession?
Well, there's a lot to unpack there. So let me start by saying that, first of all, when it comes to the stock market, the numbers that we see today, the numbers we saw yesterday, the numbers will see tomorrow are a snapshot of a moment in time. And as President Trump has said, and I'm here to echo the remarks of this president of this White House, we are in a period of economic transition. We are in a period of transition from the mess that was created under Joe Biden in the previous administration. Joe Biden left this country in an economic disaster. Several statistics to point out. The delinquency rate on credit card loans increased 63% under Joe Biden, hitting a near 12-year high. Under Joe Biden, all net job growth went to foreign-born Americans. Real wages declined by 1.5% under Joe Biden. And as we all know, and this administration continues to combat, prices soared more than 20% under Joe Biden because of his reckless spending and economic policies. So we are in a period of transition from that economic nightmare under a president who had no idea what he was doing, never held a private sector job in his life, into a golden age of American manufacturing under a businessman and a deal maker in chief in President Donald J. Trump, who is implementing the formula that we know works. Look at President Trump's results in his first term. If people are looking for certainty, they should look at the record of this president. That's why the American people reelected him back to this office. And look at everything that President Trump has already done and his team has already done in just 51 days. The massive efforts to deregulate, tax cuts, which we need Congress to pass the Trump economic agenda, the Trump tax cuts, which will unleash economic growth. And the president also addressed this directly, I will point out as well, when you look at what he said on Air Force One, and he said he wants the American people to have so much money in their pockets they don't even know what to do with it. That's the intent of this administration, and we're working very hard every day on that goal.
Second.
She didn't stutter once.
No, and I was thinking while you were playing that, I'm like, this is her response to one reporter. She does this for every reporter, for every press conference, never falters, always gives these thorough answers. It is just like such a joy to listen to her.
Oh, I know. I know. There was another clip of her because this was from a couple days ago, but then since then, the CPI index came out. So there was another clip, but they had, the helicopter and stuff in the background. So I didn't want to play it. But she was like, well, despite what you all were saying would happen, the CPI index came out and inflation is down. Actually, it's been the lowest it's been in 4 years. And guess what? Freaking egg prices dropped 11% and are now lower than under the Biden administration. And all I can picture is all of these liberals just crying because that was their main talking point, the price of eggs. And now even that is down. And I just think it's fucking awesome. So,
Fantastic.
okay, enough about tariffs. I think we've run that into the ground. Um, I want to talk about the Department of Education. I can't wait to see what all unfolds because there's a lot happening right now. And I think, again, the hypocrisy, right? Because the same people who locked down schools for 2 years during COVID are now crying about Trump dismantling the Department of Education. And so on Tuesday, like late Tuesday, Department of Education staff were told, don't come to work on Wednesday, and all the offices were closed. Then, around half of, I think it was a little less than half of the 4,000 employees were notified that they were terminated. And so the education secretary, Linda McMahon, put out a statement and she said that the reduction reflects the department's commitment to efficiency, accountability, and directing resources to where they matter most, to the students, parents, and teachers. I like that. She also went on Laura Ingraham on Fox News and she said that this is the first step in shutting down the Department of Education. Like she confirmed that. And so they went into what's actually being cut because, of course, the left is making it sound like all of these really important resources are being cut. No, what's being targeted right now is the Office of Civil Rights, which focuses on issues like gender neutral bathrooms. So it's not affecting things like student loans or important student resources. A lot of that stuff will just simply shift to different departments. And McMahon said she wants to give control of education back to the states. So this just got the wheels turning. Because remember, I'm going through this right now where I'm shifting my kids to homeschool. And here in Florida, they're basically giving us the funding as the parents instead of giving it to the school. So I was curious, how much money does the Department of Education get and how much goes to each student? Well, first of all, good luck trying to find it and make sense of the budget because on the Department of Education website and then on usaspending.gov, it shows money being allocated to like grants and contracts. And what Doge showed us is how corrupt all of these grants and contracts are in our government. So that didn't really answer my question. So I resorted to asking ChatGPT to scour the available information that's publicly out there and figure out where the money is going. So this is according to ChatGPT. But in fiscal year 2024, the Department of Education received $268 billion. Of that, only 73.5 billion was discretionary spending, which means that's the money that actually went directly to students and programs that would help, like disabled students, teacher development, low income schools, like the really important things. So there are about 34.4 million K through 12 students. So if you divide that out, that's only like $1,500 per student per year right now. So where the hell is the rest of the $268 billion going? Well,
Right.
it went to bureaucrats that manage and service student loans. ChatGPT says the costs associated with administering these loans, including borrower services and default management, contribute significantly to the department's overall budget. Okay, so it's literally going to people that are like processing the loans, like admin staff, which is insane. This should be going directly to the students. And if all of that money did go directly to students, it would be around $8,000 per student instead of $1,500 per student. And that the 8,000, that's like roughly the total amount per student that comes from state and local taxes. And so as we've talked about in the previous episodes with DeSantis and how he wants to cut property taxes, the majority of property taxes go to funding public schools. So if the Department of Education funds were rerouted to the states like President Trump wants, then this whole plan that DeSantis and all these other governors have to eliminate property taxes would actually be feasible. That's how you would make up the money. So it's all making sense now, like where they're headed. I'm keeping my fingers crossed, that this actually
Yeah.
goes through. But of course, like we're already getting pushback, right? Because now you have New York's Letitia James that filed a lawsuit to reinstate the fired employees because she's saying this is going to hurt millions of students, especially those with disabilities and in low income communities. And says, he can't fire all these people without an act of Congress. So they're immediately trying to stop all of this from happening.
Well, she's not the only one trying to stop this kind of stuff because speaking of reinstating employees, yesterday there was a U.S. District Judge, William Alsup. He's a Clinton appointed judge in San Francisco, and he ordered that all federal agencies, including the DoD, the Treasury, Department of Energy, Department of the Interior, Department of Agriculture, and Department of Veterans Affairs, all have to rehire the tens of thousands of probationary employees that were fired by the Trump admin. And he said that these firings were a sham and that the Office of Personnel Management made an unlawful decision to terminate the employees. And it was basically, in his opinion, the Trump administration attempting to circumvent federal laws by saying the firings were due to performance. And he said he doesn't believe that's the case and called it a gimmick. And he said, it is a sad, sad day when our government would fire a good employee and say it was based on performance when they know good and well that was a lie. And then he told a DOJ attorney, he said, you will not bring the people in here to be cross-examined. You're afraid to do so because you know cross-examination would reveal the truth. I tend to doubt that you're telling me the truth. I'm tired of seeing you stonewall and trying to get at the truth. But, so like clearly he's very not in support of what Trump's doing, but I will give him credit because he did make it clear that he's not ruling that the government can't lay off personnel at federal agencies. They just have to do it differently. And he said, the words I give you today should not be taken that some wild and crazy judge in San Francisco said an administration cannot engage in a reduction of force. It can be done if it's done in accordance with the law.
I think it's a sad day when a judge can overrule the president of the United States, you know? And this is just like, this is why people don't give a shit that all these people lost their jobs because in the real world, people lose their jobs all the time. These companies come in and they wipe out whole entire departments, no questions asked. But in the government, like it doesn't matter. You're protected. And this is the problem that people have, normal people with government employees, because it's our tax dollars that are paying their salaries. And so, it's just, again, it's fine when Bill Clinton does it, but it's not okay when Trump does it.
And I want to mention something else because I just saw this like right before we hopped on the podcast, but when it comes to Doge, I guess they said yesterday that over the last 2 days, they canceled another 239 wasteful contracts to the tune of $1.7 billion. And there's a lot of backlash on this because there's a lot of jobs being lost once again. And so I guess I'm just going to read some of the spending here because that's one of my favorite things to do lately on the podcast. So there was, let's see, the elimination of the contracts, this is according to the Fox News article. It's a savings of about 400 million, according to Doge, including an 8.5 million consulting contract for fiscal stewardship to improve management and program operations in order to drive innovation and improve efficiency and effectiveness of business services, rethink, realign, and reskill the workforce, and enhance program delivery through a number of transformational initiatives. What does that even mean, Stephanie?
I was just thinking, this is like a bunch of like corporate talk to try and make something sound like it's valuable when it's really just bullshit.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And then I guess on Tuesday, the National Institute of Health canceled multiple grants, all the DEI grants, including 699,000 for studying cannabis use among sexual minority gender diverse individuals and 620,000 for an LGB plus inclusive teen pregnancy prevention program for transgender boys. Also 225,000 in federal funds to the University of Colorado to study the effects of hormones on headaches in trans masculine adults. On Wednesday, Agricultural Secretary Brooke Rollins identified 379,000 in Department of Agriculture grants to San Francisco to educate queer, trans, and BIPOC urban farmers and consumers about food justice and values aligned markets.
What a load of bullshit. I mean, and why is everything about like these sexual fetishes, like trans, gender, like everything has to relate to that. And it's just crazy. It's crazy.
I wanted to read that because it kind of goes along with what you were saying about even what's going on in the Department of Education. The amount of stuff that's for administrative
Hmm.
purposes that's really not going to help anybody, and it's all just going to admin for these ridiculous grants and programs. It's absolutely wasteful spending.
Well, and that's what Lee Zeldin was talking about with the EPA. Like all the stuff he's cutting, he was saying this was all implemented during the Biden administration, all this climate stuff, right? Most of it is spending like this, where they're not, he used the example. He's like, okay, so you're some bureaucrat, like admin that's monitoring climate change. And instead of getting a grant for $100,000, it's for like $100 million. And you never have to turn in anything. No one's watching you. Like it's such a scam. And I mean, you would think after all of the things we've listed, surely that's it. No, they keep finding more and more and more, and they haven't even gone through like 1% of all the departments now. It's
Yeah.
crazy. So, the last thing I want to freaking talk about is the Ukraine war. Like, I don't know, Tara. I'm getting to the point where I just cringe talking about it. I'm just done with it. But I just wanted to give a super brief recap because on Tuesday, Ukraine conducted this big drone strike aimed at Russian oil facilities. And Russia's saying that it shot down 337 drones. They said 3 people were killed and 18 were injured. But then Ukraine's claiming, like, no, we didn't hurt anyone. We were just hitting infrastructure. And so, anyhow, they're saying this was likely a Ukrainian show of force right before agreeing to this 30-day ceasefire deal. And so then Marco Rubio makes this 30-day deal and says, okay, the ball is in Russia's court now. Well, then Russia conducted a strike against Ukraine in Zelensky's hometown. And so I'm assuming that's Russia giving payback for what Ukraine just did. And like maybe they just wanted to do that and now they'll sign this ceasefire and we can start moving on from this nightmare shit show because I'm so fucking sick of talking about it. But I don't know. It's kind of up in the air.
Well, it sounds like from what I saw yesterday, Putin's considering the ceasefire, but he hasn't agreed to it. And he basically said he agrees in principle, but there's issues that have to be discussed, and there are certain conditions that have to be met. And his concern is that a ceasefire is just going to allow Ukraine to regroup and then continue mobilizing their forces and rearming them with weapons and supplies. And he was saying Russia doesn't want a temporary truce, they want a long-term solution. And I totally get his stance on this, especially after Rubio, met with Ukrainian diplomats on Tuesday, and we agreed to restore military aid and intelligence sharing to Ukraine in exchange for them agreeing to this 30-day ceasefire. So I get where Putin's coming from on that. And so, of course, now Zelensky is saying, see, it's not us, it's Putin that's holding up this ceasefire deal because he's manipulative and this is very predictable and he doesn't really want to end the war and we do. So, now we're just going into this whole back and forth thing again. And then last I saw from Trump is he's like, yeah, we're getting very close to a deal, but I don't I haven't seen any like thing concrete from Russia on that at all.
I haven't either. I think it was on Megyn Kelly that said Putin wants to speak directly to Trump, which I think he should. I think that's the only way this is going to happen. So maybe now, like this has given him enough motivation to sit in a room with Trump and figure out how to make this permanent and not just a 30-day, ceasefire. So hopefully, because I am just over it. Um, so yeah, I have to like completely shift gears. You're gonna freaking love this, Tara. Okay. When you were talking about the Canadian new prime minister and you mentioned like he's been a part of all this climate change stuff in the past, okay? It just got me thinking how none of these liberal leaders actually care about climate change. I think most people realize that now, but it's like the elites that run the world, they know the best way to retain power is to keep the rest of us poor and divided and in a constant state of fear. And so, what's the best way to keep people poor and fearful? Well, take away their cheap energy by telling them that the world will end because of CO2 emissions. And it's really just about that. Like, it's about power. It has nothing to do with climate change. Okay. If it were about climate change, they wouldn't be destroying the Amazon rainforest for a one time event, which is exactly what the elites are doing. Okay. So, get this, to make way for the climate summit, COP30, that will be taking place in Brazil, they're cutting down thousands of acres of the Amazon rainforest to create a 4-lane highway to increase traffic or to ease traffic for the summit, because they're going to have 50,000 attendees, including world leaders. This is just insane. Okay. The people crying about CO2 emissions are the ones chopping down thousands of trees, which literally clean the CO2 out of the air and give us oxygen. And they're clearing this 13-kilometer wide path in the Amazon for a one-time event where they are going to lecture the rest of us in the world about carbon emissions. If that's not hypocrisy, I don't know what is. And let's not forget, it's the leftist climate change activists that are also lighting Teslas on fire. So, they've been pushing electric vehicles for the last 4 years, but now they are going out and torching Teslas, all because they have Elon derangement syndrome, because they have no values and they don't really stand for anything. And climate change is just a front for their insane policies that would otherwise make zero sense. It's like, you can't make this shit up.
No, and this move in the Amazon is also fucking over the people who live there because there I was reading this one article where a local resident was saying their family depended on, I guess, I never know how to pronounce this right. Acai? How do you pronounce that word?
Acai.
Like an acai bowl, whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I guess there's acai trees and some local residents like they, obviously like took down all the trees and that's what the family was like supporting themselves with was these acai trees and now they're no longer there. So they're not only destroying the rainforest, but they're also destroying how people make a living in the Amazon.
Yeah, and they're all going to fly their private jets, which have more CO2 emissions than, we do like in our entire lifetime. But, that's okay because it's the elites. Yeah, just complete bullshit. Okay, but switching gears yet again, because there's something else totally random that came up. So, you know how I was obsessed with the Maui fires, and I, to this day, completely believe the fires were planned. So remember back when we were talking about all of this, and there was that police chief, John Pelletier, who was like super shady. And we found out that he was also the police chief during the Las Vegas shooting. Well, he was just named as a co-conspirator in the Diddy case. I mean,
What?
yes, yes. So the Maui News Now reported on this, saying Pelletier was named in a civil suit by Ashley Parham and two unnamed individuals who alleged that he was hired by Combs, aka Diddy, as security in 2018. And the lawsuit also claims that while he was the Las Vegas police captain, he posed as a California deputy who responded to a gang rape call involving Diddy. And he shows up and tells the victims to go home. He didn't offer help or medical care. And she also alleges in the suit that he took her and another victim at gunpoint to his home, restrained them, didn't allow them to call an attorney, and continued covering up the crime. So this is what's in the lawsuit. Now, the Island News released a statement from Pelletier responding to this, and it says, I want to address the recent request by Mayor Bisson to the Maui County Police Commission regarding my position as chief of police. Let me be clear. The allegations made against me are completely false, and I have not been formally served with any legal paperwork. Throughout my career, I have served with integrity and dedication, and I am deeply disappointed by this request, which I believe to be both premature and unjust. I understand the importance of transparency and accountability in law enforcement, and I fully intend to cooperate with any necessary process to ensure the truth is known. However, I firmly believe no one should face professional consequences based on unsubstantiated claims. I remain committed to the officers, staff, and residents of this county, and I sincerely appreciate the support of those who know my character, my dedication to my family, and my lifelong commitment to this profession. Despite this challenge, my focus remains on serving this community and leading the Maui Police Department with honor and integrity as it deserves. So, I mean, there's nothing proven. It's all just part of a civil suit. But all I could think about, Tara, when reading this was like, he was posing as a California deputy in 2018 for Diddy, which would have been in LA, where you were a police officer at the time. So what's your take on it? Did you ever get called to Diddy's house, first of all? Can you like wink if you did?
If I did, I would have told you that a long time ago. Yeah, no, never went to Diddy's house, never had any involvement in any of this. Um, wow, like on one hand, I firmly believe that there are a shit ton of frivolous, crazy lawsuits out there, and you know, I don't know. I don't know because I do think it's shady or interesting, I'll say, that this guy has been involved in two, or not even involved, but has been there for two very high profile, basically disaster incidents. And now this Diddy connection is very interesting.
Yeah.
So,
We'll see what comes
wow.
out because, again, he hasn't been charged with anything. But yeah, it's very interesting, especially since this guy, we already felt like he was very shady and corrupt. So I wouldn't be
Yeah.
surprised, but who knows? Maybe the truth will come out. All right. Well, yeah, we went all over the place today. Just another typical week in news. So you enjoy your time in Dublin and everyone have a great weekend. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you back here on Monday.